he decided to take a Stradivarius whiskey to show it to the president. So he carefully put the violin in the violin case, and he showed up at the front gate of the White House when he was stopped by a Secret Service agent. He wanted to know who he was and why he was there. Jack Benny identified himself and said, "I have an appointment to see the president today." The Secret Service agent called from the front gate. "Yes, you did have an appointment to see the president. Okay, you can go in." He went through the front gate and started walking up the front terrace when he was told the second time by a heavily armed Marine who was one of the White House guard. The Marine demanded to know what was in the violin case. Jack Benny, being the comedian that he was, jokingly said, "It's a machine gun." The Marine put down his weapon, sat down on the grass, took off his cap, wiped his brow, and said, "That's a relief. First, I was afraid you would come to the White House today to play the violin." Former United States Senator Bill Bradley tells the story of a friend of his named Dorothy Bradley, no relation. Dorothy Bradley once ran for governor of the state of Montana on a Democratic ticket and was narrowly defeated by her Republican opponent. After the election, Dorothy Bradley was somewhat at loose ends, and she was trying to decide what to do with her life. She finally decided that she wanted to teach kids, except that she couldn't be a teacher because she wasn't certified. She could be governor, right? She couldn't be a teacher. She was finally offered a job as a teacher's assistant in a one-room schoolhouse in rural northwest Montana. And Dorothy said, "Fine." So she took the job. While she was there, Senator Bradley called her and said, "Dorothy, how are you doing?" And Dorothy answered by telling him about the campaign. Her lieutenant governor running mate was from Billings, Montana. And during the campaign, he was always crisscrossing the state campaigning, giving speeches, and he was never at home. He felt guilty about neglecting his family. So he said, "All right, tomorrow morning, I'm going to be home and have breakfast with my children." The night before, he was giving a very late-night campaign speech about 300 miles from Billings. After the speech, he got on a single-engine propeller plane to return to Billings. Shortly after he got airborne, suddenly, all the lights in the plane went out. And they realized that they were lost over this dark, vast Montana wilderness. And then the moon came out. And the moonlight shone on the Yellowstone River below, and the pilot quickly realized that if he followed the Yellowstone River in the moonlight, it would eventually lead them back to Billings. So the pilot followed the Yellowstone River in the moonlight. They got back to Billings. Lieutenant Governor Kennedy had breakfast with his children. And that's when Dorothy said to the senator, "You know, Bill, I'm doing okay, but I don't know if I'll ever make it back to Billings." When I heard that, I had chills going up and down my spine. I said to myself, isn't that all of our stories? Don't we all have doubts whether we'll ever get back to Billings, whatever Billings means in our own lives? I think Dorothy was trying to say to the senator, I don't know if I'll ever get back to basics in my own life. During the late 1940s and early 1950s, there was a very famous chemist named Joseph W. Kennedy, Jr. He had a PhD in radiochemistry and worked on he was one of the scientists who worked on the atom bomb on the Manhattan Project during World War II to develop the atom bomb. After the war was over, he came to Washington University to become chairman of the chemistry department. He helped develop the chemistry department into what it is today. My father happened to be working at Washington University at the time, and he got to know Professor Kennedy. He soon learned that Professor Kennedy and his wife liked to play bridge. Now, saying the word bridge to my father was like waving a red flag in front of a bull. So one day in late August of 1946, my father called Professor Kennedy and said, "Why don't you and Mrs. Kennedy come to our house tonight for dinner? My wife will cook dinner, and after dinner we can all play bridge." Professor Kennedy said, "I'd love to, but I can't. I have to study tonight." My father said, "What do you mean you have to study?" Professor Kennedy said, "I just learned that I will be teaching the freshman chemistry course this fall, and I have to relearn all the basic fundamentals of chemistry. I've long since forgotten." My father could hardly believe this. Here was a PhD nuclear genius from the Manhattan Project who felt the need to go back and relearn the basics of chemistry so so he could teach chemistry 101 to incoming freshmen. I think I understand how Professor Cannon felt. I think we all have to go back to basics in our own lives. I know I do. But when I feel the need to go back to basics in my own personal life, I don't read the chemistry textbook. I read the Holy Scriptures, which after all should be the rule and guide of our faith and practice. Let us stand and sing hymn number